They say home is where the heart is. But what happens when that home becomes a battleground? When the people meant to protect your community turn against you? Driven by greed, by pride, by unchecked power, I lost everything the day Meadow Ridge Court turned on me. My house, my memories, my peace of mind. All consumed by fire and betrayal. But what they didn't know was that some losses don't break you. They rebuild you. Stronger, smarter, unstoppable. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a story about standing up when no one else dares, about reclaiming more than bricks and mortar, reclaiming dignity, truth, and the soul of a community. So if you've ever been knocked down, doubted, or underestimated, this story is for you. When Ethan Walker first rolled through the white-bricked entrance of Silverwood Heights, Colorado, he believed he was finally home. 25 years of grinding through startups, sleepless nights, and endless airports had paid off. Now, standing before his custom-built mansion, 3 stories of glass, stone, and steel perched atop the highest hill, he felt like he'd claimed a piece of the American dream. At first, life in Silverwood Heights felt almost too perfect. Neighbors waved politely. Kids biked safely along tree-lined streets. And the HOA newsletter boasted about community values and unified aesthetics. Ethan, a private man, didn't mind playing along. He trimmed his hedges, parked his Tesla discreetly in the garage, and nodded respectfully at the monthly meetings. Then came the first bright orange violation notice slapped onto his oak front door. Mailbox non-compliant with community standards. Bo, confused. Ethan reread the community manual. His mailbox was identical to 5 others on the street. Shrugging it off as a clerical mistake, he replaced it anyway. But within days, another notice arrived. This time, it was his imported rose bushes, apparently exceeding the maximum height by 3 inches. Then, the color of his outdoor lighting. Then, the design of his driveway pavers. Each violation came with escalating threats of fines. The woman behind the clipboard was Marissa Bell, the vice president of the HOA, always dressed in crisply ironed polos. Clipboard clutched to her chest like a badge of authority. Marissa had a way of smiling without warmth. She treated every conversation like a courtroom cross-examination. "You understand?" She said sweetly, one afternoon, while photographing Ethan's garden from the sidewalk. Silverwood Heights has standards to maintain. Property values depend on uniformity. Ethan bit back the sharp reply brewing in his throat. He'd worked too hard to let petty politics sour his new beginning. He complied. Again, trimmed, repainted, adjusted, hoping it would end. It didn't. Instead, the violations multiplied. Ridiculous. Fabricated. Weaponized. He wasn't alone, either. Douglas and Maria, his neighbors 2 houses down, confided one evening that they'd also been targeted last year. Maria wiped a tear from her eye as she spoke about losing their home to mounting fines, forced to sell for pennies to a mysterious development company connected to Marissa's cousin. "Once you're in her sights," Douglas said grimly, "there's no escaping." The more Ethan listened, the clearer it became. This wasn't about aesthetics or standards. It was strategic harassment, a scheme to push out homeowners, devalue properties, and open the door for redevelopment deals. Ethan tried documenting every interaction, every notice. He reached out to the HOA management company, Everstead Property Management, only to receive templated replies and cold reassurances that all violations are properly verified. The final blow came not in the form of a notice, but a threat. During a monthly HOA meeting, sparsely attended and dominated by Marissa's inner circle, a quiet motion passed proposing that habitually non-compliant properties could be subjected to accelerated foreclosure proceedings. Ethan felt the chill in the room as Marissa locked eyes with him, her lips curling into a smile that no longer hid its malice. In that moment, Ethan realized he wasn't fighting a petty bureaucrat. He was fighting a machine, one that fed on silence, fear, and apathy. And if he didn't fight back, really fight, he'd lose everything. He didn't know it yet. But this was the moment the fire was lit. Not just the one that would burn down his house, but the one that would awaken something far more dangerous inside him. Purpose. 2 weeks after the HOA meeting, Ethan's worst fears became reality. It started at dawn on a Sunday. A shrill security system alert jolting him awake. Groggy. He grabbed his phone. Motion detected. Backyard. He pulled up the live feed. Shadows danced along the fence line. Figures. 2, maybe 3, crouched near his electrical panel. Before Ethan could even process what he was seeing, the lights flickered. Then came the bang. A muffled explosion shook the foundation. Smoke poured through the vents. Ethan stumbled out of bed, coughing, barely managing to grab his laptop and a small lockbox from his safe before the fire swallowed his home. Outside, the cold air cut through his smoke-scorched lungs. Neighbors emerged from their pristine homes in bathrobes and slippers, watching the spectacle with horrified fascination. And behind them, Marissa stood stone still, arms crossed, face unreadable. The fire department worked for hours, but it was hopeless. The mansion Ethan had spent 25 years building, gone. His imported library, the custom Italian sculpture his wife had given him before she died, every framed memory, ashes. When the fire chief approached, he wore a grim look. Preliminary findings suggest electrical fault, maybe sabotage. He said carefully, "You weren't running any generators." "No," Ethan rasped, still staring at the blackened skeleton of his dream. Insurance was supposed to be his safety net. But when he contacted them, a harsher blow awaited. "Mr. Walker," the agent said apologetically, "there was an amendment filed to your policy 3 weeks ago. Fire coverage was waived. It's legally binding." Bosuya. Ethan's breath caught. He hadn't signed any amendment. Forgery, sabotage, targeted destruction, and he knew exactly who had orchestrated it. But worse than the financial loss was the isolation. No police intervention. No neighbors rallying behind him. At the emergency HOA meeting held just 2 days later, Marissa presented her plan to beautify the burned property by converting it into a community garden, conveniently managed by her cousin's construction firm, sitting at the back of the community center. Ethan listened in cold silence as the crowd, lulled by promises of rising property values and picturesque landscaping, murmured agreement. The vote passed. Unanimous. He was being erased, systematically, efficiently, legally. But they underestimated one thing. Ethan hadn't lost everything. He still had his mind, his network, his millions tucked safely in diverse assets, untouchable by HOA hands. And most importantly, he had nothing left to lose. As he walked out of the meeting into the cold Colorado night, the chill wasn't just from the wind anymore. It was something darker, something resolute, standing under the flickering streetlight. Ethan made a silent vow. They thought they destroyed him. They had only awakened something far, far worse. The battle wasn't over. It had just begun. 6 months later, the residents of Meadow Ridge Court received an unexpected letter. The community management company, Greenstone Holdings, was under new ownership, and with that came changes, massive changes. What Marissa and her circle didn't know was that Ethan had spent every day since the fire meticulously planning his return. With a portion of his hidden fortune, he quietly acquired a controlling interest in Greenstone Holdings through shell corporations, not just for Meadow Ridge Court, but for the management of 57 other communities across the state. He didn't come back swinging. He came back owning. At the next HOA meeting, it wasn't Marissa who led the proceedings. It was a calm, collected man in a dark gray suit, Ethan Walker, announced as the new interim president of the HOA board. Per Greenstone Holdings' directives, the community center buzzed like a beehive kicked into chaos. Marissa sat frozen, her mouth half open, Visibly struggling to process what was happening, Ethan cleared his throat, unrolling a thick stack of documents on the podium. Before we proceed, I'd like to address a few items. First, he revealed the forged insurance documents. A forensic analyst had authenticated the signature as a fake, the same handwriting matching a known associate of Marissa. Second, he presented the fire investigation report, intentional tampering with electrical systems, clear signs of arson. Third, he unveiled the city council's findings from an independent audit he had initiated, uncovering illegal rezoning attempts, falsified complaints, and kickbacks involving Marissa's relatives. Each piece of evidence struck the room like a hammer blow. Neighbors who once whispered about Ethan now stared at Marissa with growing hostility. The very people she manipulated now looked at her like she was toxic. This community deserves transparency, Ethan said quietly, locking eyes with her. And justice. He paused, then dropped the final bombshell. As of today, pending legal proceedings, all board members complicit in misconduct are removed. New elections will be held, and criminal charges are being pursued. At the back of the room, two uniformed deputies entered, walking purposefully toward Marissa. Her face turned a sickly shade of gray. She bolted up, papers flying from her lap. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "This is my neighborhood. I built this place." The officers weren't listening. They gently but firmly cuffed her wrists. Reading her rights, the room stayed silent, stunned. Somewhere near the exit, Douglas, once too timid to challenge the HOA, broke into tentative applause. It spread. Claps. Cheers. A few whoops of cathartic release. Ethan didn't smile. He simply gathered his papers and walked out into the brisk evening air, breathing in the crisp scent of pine and earth. For the first time in months, he felt weightless. The fire hadn't destroyed him. It had forged him into something stronger. As he stood under the stars, neighbors approached him, one after another, some offering thanks, others apologies. An elderly woman, tears in her eyes, gripped his hand. "Thank you for fighting when we were too afraid." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "No one should ever be afraid in their own home," he said simply. Later that night, as the last echoes of the chaos faded, Ethan sat quietly at the edge of the empty lot where his mansion once stood. The ground was bare, but not barren. He had plans, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been trampled by greed, corruption, and fear. A real community was about to rise from these ashes, and this time, it would be built on trust, not terror, built by people, for people, built to last.